And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Mr. Steve Balsherry. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today's episode, we're going through all of the craziness that surrounded the cutdown day across the NFL, including all the Patriots transactions, the initial 53-man roster. We did have a couple of trades to discuss, and then talk about the practice squad too. Obviously, there's a lot of moves, so we're going to try to get to as much as we can. Before we dive right into it, I want to go ahead and say what's up to my man, Steve Balsherry. How we doing, Steve?
Good. Second hurricane passed by, so
Yep.
This one was a lot less damaging than the one last year, at least in our neighborhood. So everyone's good here. The sun's out, and it's time to talk some football.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have a ton to talk about. So I don't even really know where to start, but like we kind of just talked about off air, I think the best plan of action would be to basically just go through the 53-man roster, and then we'll kind of talk about some of these moves as we go. So let's just jump right into it, Steve. Patriots, they had to make their cut downs. We knew last week when we were going back and forth, we were going to have a lot of tough decisions to make. The team was going to have some tough decisions to make, and they certainly did. Give me just right off the top your opening thoughts on the Patriots' initial 53-man roster.
Well, there was a few surprises on there, cutting both quarterbacks. Now, we kind of thought Malik Cunningham, they were going to dangle him out there and see if they could bring him back. But the fact that they cut Bailey Zappe, and I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
That was interesting. That was a bit of a surprise. The wide receivers, not much of a surprise there. Same with the running backs. I thought they might have held on to a third, but they obviously, we're not pleased with the guys that they let go. They did bring back one of them, so there you go. 11 offensive linemen is a lot, but considering the health, it makes sense. And that's, why they made two of the trades that they did was more health related. The interior defensive line, I don't think there was too many surprises there. The edge guys were no brainer. Same with the linebackers. There was a little surprise at corner. I thought keeping Amir Speed, Speed. I can't talk today. And Sean Wade.
I must be rubbing off on you.
Yeah.
I was surprised by Speed and Sean Wade as well. Although I will say that going back and watching the games, I still didn't think he was going to make the roster, but it's one of those things, Steve, where Sean Wade's the perfect example of a guy who you can't necessarily, just judge off only what you see in, preseason games, unless you're really down there seeing reps, seeing things behind the scenes. I think Sean Wade right now, I'm not saying he's playing well, but I think he's playing about as well as he ever has for this team. And he's still a young player. I don't really know what his ceiling is, but I think that he's playing about as good as he's played for the team at this moment, and that's why he made it.
Yeah, and his versatility definitely helped.
Definitely.
Yeah, because he mixed in a little bit at the slot. He mixed in a little bit at safety. And, that's the Belichick mantra. The more you can do, So that definitely helped his case. So, trading Nick Folk, I didn't think was a big shocker. I know a lot of people acted like it was. But, you have a young guy you invested a fourth-round draft pick in, and he has a tremendous leg. But, the one thing we always talked about, Nick Folk was money, inside of 40 yards, inside of 45, really. And, but, if you look at the training camp and preseason, the numbers were pretty similar. So you have to go with the young guy with the big leg, I think.
Right. And yeah, you give us a lot to go on there. So we could go in a bunch of different things. I was surprised by the return for Folk. I thought you'd get something better than a 7th-round draft pick a couple of years down the road, although that was very similar to the trade for the Browns and the Chargers, I believe. I think it was the exact same compensation. Given the need at kicker, I thought maybe we'd get like a 5th or 6th rounder for him. It just goes to show you really never know what kind of compensation a player is going to bring back in this league. It always seems much higher or much lower in my mind than what it should be. But, very rarely does it seem to line up perfectly. But irregardless, Nick Folk's gone, incredibly consistent. I think he only missed 13 field goals. I think he had who's 108 for 121, I want to say, in his career with the Patriots. Is that correct? That's going off the top of my head. So, I would say, you're talking about a player who really played some good football for the team. I put a poll out, and I'll ask you the same question, Steve, okay? Because I do want to get to the Zappe stuff, because aside from Nick Folk, I thought Zappe was really obviously the biggest talk of the town, and there's some other stuff to talk about. But I put this poll out on Twitter and basically said, would you, if you were the Patriots and Bill, would you sacrifice potentially 1 or 2 wins going with Chad Ryland versus Nick Folk? Now, I know that's a tough question because, for one, you're basically assuming that the young kid's going to miss a couple of kicks. But I do think that a lot of people would agree that the Patriots will probably be in some tighter games. The schedule is going to be tough, and every field goal counts. And if Chad Ryland has his ups and downs, as a lot of rookies do you just roll with the guy you just put a 4th-round pick on because he's your future, or do you stick with the veteran? Because what if the difference is 6 and 8 versus, or 6 wins versus 8 wins, 7 wins versus 9 wins? That's going to be a big swing in a division that's competitive. I think they made the right call, Steve. I still think that you invested in this guy, and you got to take your lumps, even if it happens. He has the leg, and you just hope that he's able to start strong in his rookie year and kind of work through any issues that he had towards the end of the summer.
Yes, and hello to Claire Cooper, who just checked in with us.
What's up, Claire?
We haven't talked to Claire in a bit, but no, you can actually roll the dice the other way too. What happens late in a game if you're, plus 50, right, at the end of the game? Would this guy give you an extra win or two that Nick Folk maybe wouldn't have the range for?
Sure.
So I do think they made the right call. They have a youth movement afoot, and Folk's been tremendous. No one is stating otherwise. But, eventually age catches up to everybody, and he's getting up there. And I think his age was one of the reasons why they didn't get as much as perhaps we thought they would get for him.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So we'll see. I think your point of, hey, if you're at the 55, or almost close to 60 field goal mark, you know that Folk's not going. You're not going to hit that with Nick Folk. Mm-hmm. So that'll be interesting. And I see Claire's comments. I'll get to them in a second because I want to go to Zappe Fever. Okay, and I will say this. Looks like Bill Belichick gave Patriots Nation a big dose of Tylenol for that fever because he was cut. I think a lot of people were shocked by it. I will say, spoiler alert, if you haven't heard already, he's back with the team on the practice squad. A lot of people are expecting him to rejoin the 53-man roster at some point. I don't expect him to bounce back and forth between the practice squad and the 53-man. I think he'll be the backup. But there is a lot of smoke to the fire, Steve, that the Patriots are looking for another veteran QB. And I'll just say this. There's been a lot of talk about Bailey Zappe, Mac Jones, okay? And I said this to you off the air, and I tweeted it out earlier as well. Say what you want. You can argue however you want about Bailey Zappe and the team's thoughts. The fact that they waived him, even if they felt strongly they could get him back, they were willing to risk losing him. And that is, to me, still surprising, Steve. as much as I'm not the biggest Zappe fan, I thought he played. It's frustrating because you almost feel like when you make this argument, we've said this 100 times on the show, when you're talking about the stupid Mac Jones, Bailey Zappe thing, it almost feels like you have to disparage Zappe in order to prove your point. But even though I don't think he's a starting NFL quarterback, I still think he was a rookie that was in a really tough spot last year and pretty much played as well as you could hope for. And the fact that he spent a year in the system, to me, the fact they were willing to let him go means that there was something behind the scenes they weren't happy about. A lot of people talked about his arm angles and falling in love with the sidearm throws over the summer. There was the blowout with Bill O'Brien and going back into the preseason game late. Some people are speculating that he's not a fit for the Bill O'Brien offense. And so there's a lot of different directions to go, Steve. Either way, he's back with the team. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are happy with that. I just still think the point cannot be swept under the rug that they were willing to lose him, and that's just a surprise to me overall.
Yeah, because you look at some of the young rookie players that they didn't want to risk losing, and they were willing to risk Zappe. And, and Claire makes a good point. He played better in a lesser complex offense. They moved back to what would be the typical Patriots offense this year, with some wrinkles of Bill O'Brien thrown in there. And he didn't handle it well. He didn't have a good summer. I know a lot of people keep saying he played as well as Jones did in training camp, and he did not. I mean, we heard that every single day, Zappe, well, not every day, but most days, Zappe struggled. He struggled. We heard that time and again. And so the bottom line is they were willing to risk losing him. And even though he got some offers, he came back, but they risked losing him over some of these rookie players. And I think that tells you what they think deep down about him at this point. Now, could that change? Of course. But right now, they don't perceive him as a starting NFL quarterback.
Right. I mean, because you're not going to risk another team picking him up. And the fact that no one else picked him up is a little surprising to me. I thought there was a couple of teams who I thought could poke it. There's not a whole lot of roster movement. I know people are always expecting things, but even the San Francisco 49ers had the most claims of anyone out of the league. I mean, players on their team that were claimed by other teams. That's how I should phrase that. And that was only 3. Every single team in the division had 2 claims. The Patriots had a couple guys like Bill Murray went to the Bears. I thought that was a little surprising. Chasen Hines went to the Dolphins. Both practice squad, nothing on the they both cleared waivers and then signed with other teams. So, because the differentiation, I can't speak now. Thanks to you, Steve, would be that if a team claims another player, they have to go to the 53-man roster. If they clear waivers, then you can sign them to the practice squad or whatever for sake of conversation. But anyway, so I want to get to a couple of these comments because Claire is just chiming in here. So, let's see here. Zappe played better in lesser complex offense. They've moved on back to more complicated plays, potentially. She's also saying that, weight should be security. If Jack Jones isn't able to play, I certainly think that's a possibility too. Although at this stage, I'm still kind of thinking that if Jack Jones is going to, have to see any time, it's going to be after the season. But that's just a gut feeling, has nothing to do. But that very much could be the case. You can never have enough depth there. Let's see here.
Talked about Nick Folk.
Oh, talk about Nick Folk, right? So Claire has some insight here. Claire, we got to get you on here soon, okay? I don't know when, but we'll have to get you on here soon because you just have so many comments. You need to book me on the show. Yes, I just said that, and also I've invited you on the show, but you were busy. We had that conflict. I know it's late for you there. I don't know what time, but what is that, like 10 o'clock our time? So yeah. We're doing a later show today than we normally do. But yes, Claire, we will get you on the show 100%. So we can argue about tight ends or whatever. I'm sure you've been deep into the Pharaoh Brown tape, over the past couple hours, as he will be donning number 86 for the Patriots this year. Anyway, Steve, I still expect them to make a claim for, or, make a push for some kind of veteran. Case Keenum is a name I've heard floated around because of the time he's in Houston, but at the same time, I don't really think it makes any sense for Nick Caserio to move him when he is a young quarterback too. I'm not sure. I would have wanted Will Grier. I thought that was a name that a guy they'd be interested in, and they didn't want him because he got claimed he went to the Bengals, and the Patriots could have had him if they wanted to, but because it goes into the claim order goes in the same order as the draft order, so it's the Patriots were picking 14th, so they had an opportunity there, and they passed on it. Man, there's a lot to talk about. Okay, so let's just keep plowing through this. 2 running backs on the roster initially, with Ramondre Stevenson, Ezekiel Elliott, Pierre Strong traded. I thought that was really surprising. They brought in Tyrone Wheatley Jr. from the Browns. It was kind of a player-for-player swap. Wheatley they actually had him in for a workout last year, so they had been poking around him before, but has some versatility, really nice size, which they like. Pierre Strong, I'm a little surprised. It seems like they gave up on him pretty fast, Steve. But you got Kevin Harris and Ty Montgomery back on the practice squad. I'm still wondering if they bring in another running back. But for now, the two guys on the roster, Stevenson and Elliott, will be sharing that lion's share of the workload, Steve.
Yeah, and I wasn't a fan of trading away Strong. As you know, I was a big proponent of his, so I didn't like seeing him, get traded away. But I understand where Belichick was coming from. The health at tight end on the offensive line. I'm reading the comments here on the side. Health on the offensive line was a big question. You and I talked about that on our last show.
Nauseam, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a question of ability; it's a question of availability. They haven't had anybody, available, and hopefully they'll have that ironed out in the next 11 days. But, I totally get that. Belichick pointed that out, and you have to give up a player to get a player. And obviously, the Browns wanted Strong, but I was not a fan of letting him go. And so, I kind of get that, but I think he's gonna have a bright future in the NFL. They brought in 2 extra tackles. We'll see how they all work out. At least, they're getting people back at practice now. So that's a big thing. The 2 running backs, again, I think they're going to pick up somebody else. I know Ty Montgomery is back on the practice squad, but you can't rely on him. I mean, he's hurt all the time. I like Zeke and Stevenson. I think that's going to be a good backfield. And, if they bring in, I know Kevin Harris is back as well, but I would like to see him bring in a third down back in somebody who's more reliable than Ty Montgomery. I'm not questioning his ability either. I just think that, he's always hurt, and, he missed the entirety of training camp except for one day. So,
yeah, no, it's definitely a valid point to bring up. You go to receivers, Steve, and you're talking about, well, for one, 2 tight ends, a travesty, as as Miss Claire would say. I would also say that 6 receivers, I think collectively nailed that. When I say we, I mean not just us, but also them in the media. Also, unfortunately, as expected, Tyquan Thornton will be placed on short-term IR, and so he is out at least the first 4 weeks of the season. Really frustrating, Steve, to be honest. Just feel like back-to-back years, you're dealing with a young receiver who is missing the beginning of the season, and you worry about his ability to catch up after missing some time. You're worried about his durability. Can he stay healthy? And I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a bust. I mean, it's too early for that. But I do think you certainly need to see something when he comes back, something in a positive step. Because if you're picking 2 roads of which his career is going down, he's going down the wrong one right now. But it's still really early to say. So I'm not going to pound the alarm, but it doesn't make you feel good, Steve, about where Tyquan Thornton is. But as far as the other receivers goes, and the tight ends, any thoughts on those position groups here?
Yeah, again, I thought carrying 6 was the right way to go because Thornton's probably going to go on IR, and he'll miss the first month of the season. We've all expected that, but I like Butte, and obviously they liked him enough, to obviously keep him around on the 53-man roster, and I think he's going to play a role. He might not be a big, huge role, but he's going to get some snaps out there, and they're going to add a third tight end.
Well, they did add Pharaoh Brown too, so
yes, and I like Pharaoh Brown, and I think it was Mike Reese who first pointed out that he had been released and he had played for Bill O'Brien, and he's a good fit for Bill O'Brien's offense. And I think, he's probably going to be that third guy. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. He has some experience. He's caught passes in the NFL, and he's a good blocker. So I think all around with the 3 tight ends, and if you're adding him in, I think that's a good place to start. And they still have Sokol, on the practice squad. So,
yeah, no, and I thought Sokol would, probably stick around. What's going on now? You keep getting distracted in the comments. Claire, there's a not so nice word that rhymes with what you're being, and it's a tight end, rhymes with bore. Okay. Okay, they have 2. Be happy with 2. They have a couple extra on the practice squad. Okay. All right, I'm turning Claire off in the comments. It's past her bedtime, and clearly she's had a couple glasses of wine.
Well,
which
no
I'm fine
Izzo,
with.
no Izzo.
Okay, yeah, no Izzo, please.
I know she's tired because she says I is in bed.
Yeah, I is in bed. Yeah, perfect. Speaking like Steve and myself today. All right, so offensive lineman. Again, similar to Tyquan Thornton, Steve, Riley Reif starting on short-term IR. Really not a great situation. Overall, Cole Strange, talked. It seems like he'll be pretty much ready to go. Mike Onwenu, I think, will be ready to go. As long as the first 4 are healthy, Steve, Trent Brown, Cole Strange, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, I feel at least okay about the offensive line. I'm really worried about that 5th spot. I'm curious what what kind of configuration they're in. Does Onwenu play, right guard, right tackle? Who do they put in for that 5th spot? As long as those guys are healthy and motivated, those first 4 guys, Steve, I feel good about the offensive line for the most part. I don't necessarily feel great about it versus the Eagles, and they have some very tough front sevens in the first quarter of the season, which is going to be tough for them. So I'm not saying it's not something to be concerned about. It absolutely is. But if those first 4 guys we talked about are healthy and motivated, the offensive line, I feel like, will be good enough. I'm still worried about it overall, but Reif there, Reif on IR, he could come back. They did keep a couple of rookies around. They did trade for 2 veterans. I'm just curious to see what the configuration is, Steve. Calvin Anderson back at practice. I already mentioned the Tyrone Wheatley addition. They traded for Vidarian Lowe out of Minnesota. Antonio Mafi and City So, were around. Jake Andrews hung around. So there's some good depth. I think some interesting depth. I don't know about good depth, some interesting depth, but I'm still worried about what the hell they're going to do. And it's really, to me, that the question is right guard, right tackle, and the depth at tackle. Those are the 2 big questions.
Well, I think if Onwenu is healthy, I think he's going to be the right guard. And hearing Calvin Anderson's comments yesterday in the locker room, I guess it was a life-threatening illness that he had. He didn't get into details, but he made it sound
pretty serious.
It's pretty serious stuff. And he was, from all accounts that we were reading about yesterday, he was almost giddy to be back in the locker room and back on the field with the players. And that's a really good sign because they liked him in the spring. They liked what he was doing. I think that, it can't help to have him ready to go. Whether or not he'll be completely ready in such a short amount of time, he did say that he's been keeping in shape as best he can with the conditioning staff. So that's a good sign. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, having at least those 4 guys on the field, will be the first time it's happened all year. So that can't be anything but a positive, right?
Yeah, and I'm starting to wonder, honestly, Steve, if they had, after they saw Riley Reef in person and then they moved him to guard, more and more I'm starting to think that their plan was Onwenu to right tackle and Reef to play guard because they felt better about Onwenu at right tackle than they did as Riley Reef. That was my guess. Of course, it's all for nothing now because he's hurt, and I just need to get to these comments because Claire, no, I didn't actually turn your comments off, and Chris, I think that's out of bounds. Mean might be strong. I am a little harsh, but I'm listing your comments. I'm here. No worries. Okay, so no bashing me in the comments. Save that for Russ and Steve. Okay. Okay. So offensively, some surprises. We talked about it. Defensively, I will get to in just a second. Really quickly, I just want to please mention to everybody to please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcast, on wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. Of course, we are streaming right now, which is on Facebook, which is on Twitter, through a couple of our different accounts. But we are posting to YouTube. I know Ian Loeb, the headmaster over at PatsFans.com, has done a ton of videos for us, which we appreciate. And, we're happy to kind of keep putting out content for you. And we're going to go through the defense, the practice squad, and then I'll give you a preview of next week's show. But really quickly, we're just going to step aside for podcast purposes for just a couple seconds. We'll be back after this. Okay, and we are back on Patriots 4th and 2. Again, Derek Haven, Steve Balsherry. We are really, really going through a ton of news. And we started off basically talking about some of the new additions, some of the surprises, some of the transactions, the trades, really the Patriots' initial 53-man roster as a whole. And I would say to you, Steve, we had started talking about offense. We could probably keep going on it, but there's some other things I want to talk to, including the defense. So let's talk about it. We got Dietrich Wise, Sam Roberts, Keon White, Devon Godchow, Daniel Aquale, Christian Barmore, and Lawrence Guy, all for defensive linemen. So you got 7 defensive linemen. I had 7. I think you had 6. But this is pretty much the range. I think a lot of these guys are really no surprises. The Lawrence Guy thing was really, I think, the biggest question mark out of this group. And Sam Roberts, of course, being a little bit of a question mark too. I'm really happy that Sam Roberts made the team. I do think that he has some liability issues from a run standpoint, but I think they have some really interesting pass rushing defense, like big defensive linemen along this front. I mean, between Barmore, Roberts, Aquale, Keon White, you're talking about, even throwing Dietrich Wise in that mix. You're talking about 4 or 5 guys that can play kind of inside that defensive line or on the outside, and I think really make an impact and get some push up front where you have a little bit more speed at linebacker and some safeties that are playing linebacker to kind of make some plays around. I still am not super worried about the run game because Steve, honestly, the way this team is constructed, I think if a team runs on them a little bit, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because as long as it's manageable, because it will help keep that score down. But at the same time, I'm really happy about some of the athletes they have and on defense, and it starts with the front defensive line.
Yeah, and I read some interesting stuff from Evan Lazar the other night, and he was talking about with the athletes they have now on the front 7, that he thinks the Patriots will be going more to a 1 or a 1.5 gap, scheme rather than the traditional 2 gap that they always played. And
that would be interesting.
Yeah,
I'll believe it when I see it, but that'd be interesting.
Yeah. Well, when with the guys that they have, it makes a lot of sense. because you have guys that can get after it, and if they're not, weighed down by two gapping, they can get upfield more and disrupt the plays. So I kind of like that idea, and I thought it was great work by Evan. Because he talked about the scheme at length, and you can check out his columns on Patriots.com, because he's a guy that I consistently read when it comes to X's and O's.
Well, for one, I'll say this about, Evan Lazar. Also, I think Patriots fans, this is a really quick aside, but I think Patriots fans are really lucky because they have a lot of really good writers and bloggers and contributors on the beat in general. But I think they have a lot of guys who really, really enjoy football and love diving into it, and that's why Evan is so good at his job, because you can tell, for one, he really likes it, and he really dedicates a lot of time to it. Taylor Kyles is another guy I really like. Mark Schofield's another guy. They have great reporters. Don't get me wrong. Mike Reese, Karen Garigi, some of the best in the entire country, but it's just, I think Patriots fans are really lucky from that standpoint. I know they get sick and tired of some of the talking heads on, maybe radio and stuff and TV, but I think as far as beat writers go, they have a lot of really quality ones. So just a quick aside. But yeah, no, Evan's excellent at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that might fit their personnel, and add to that pressure on the quarterback this year. And I think they do need that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and Claire, a clear perspective. We can't go without mentioning that.
Yes, I did say podcasters and bloggers, but yeah, no, I was, Evan Lazar's the man. I agree. Yes, a clear perspective. I wasn't talking about specific podcasts. If I wanted to, obviously, I'd mention our show. I'd mention a clear perspective. I'd mention, I've been a big Patriots Unfiltered fan for a long time because I like what they do over PatsFans.com, and a lot of those guys I've known since I was 19 years old. Which was much longer ago than I care to admit. And then obviously, Locked On Patriots with Mark Diabate, excellent. So, or Mike Diabate, sorry. There's a lot of good podcasts for Patriots fans. I like to think that we're in that grouping too. But
absolutely,
but anyway, so let's see here. So we got, again, defensively, let's go through the linebackers now. I would say for this group, again, a couple of surprises. Matt Judon, Josh Uche, Chris Board, not surprising. Juwan Bentley, Jelani Tavai, Marte Mapu, not surprising. Anthony Jennings, Mac Wilson are the two guys that I would say are a little surprising. Anthony Jennings, less so. I know you were higher on him than me. I thought he had a really, really good preseason. I thought that last game he played in really stood out from not only a setting the edge standpoint, which we know he's been able to do since the moment he came onto the team. I thought he looked good from a pass rushing standpoint too. And if we are talking about putting both of those guys together, both of those traits together for him, I really like what he could bring to the table in a sub role. I'm not sure he's a full-time player at this juncture yet, but I think he's progressing, Steve, and we're seeing improvement, which is all you can really hope for a younger player. Mac Wilson, to me, the biggest question mark for me is, was there someone else on the team that had passed him by? Do they think that they could add a spot somewhere else? Fact of the matter is, he didn't look very good in some of the preseason games. He was out late. In terms of playing time, I do think that, for one, he's very good on special teams and his athleticism is really good. I don't necessarily think his defensive snaps are going to be super high. I think someone like Marte Mapu and Anthony Jennings could steal some of the time that he had previously, Steve, but they decided to keep him around. Really, I would say really the only true surprise at the linebacker, because I thought for sure he was on his way out.
Yeah, and you add in Calvin Munson if they need him. He played really well down the stretch, and during the preseason and camp practices, and you still have Chris Board, who's known as a special teams maven, but at the same time, he's proven with the Detroit Lions that he can play defense too. So having those guys, I think this linebacking crew is a really strong point for the defense this year.
Yeah, no, we're in agreement there. Secondary, a lot of guys to talk about. I'd classify Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, Christian Gonzalez, Jalen Mills, Jack Jones, aside from the off the field stuff. Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, Adrian Phillips, and Brendan Schooler, all not surprises, Steve. All those I meant. I know Brendan Schooler's not really a defensive back. He's more of just a special teamer, but he's here. A couple of surprises. Miles Bryant, I thought was on the bubble as he typically is, but the coaching staff really likes him. I know Patriots fans don't want to hear it, but they do. They like his versatility. If they do switch traditionally to overall more zone, which I think they could be maybe more of a penetrating system up front, maybe more of zone heavy in the back as the league kind of goes more zone than man with all the creative offensive concepts that are around the league now. Miles Bryant's a better zone player than man player, and they like him. That's what it is. So he's not going anywhere. Shaun Wade making the team was a surprise to me, and Amir Speed as well. I think that if Isaiah Bolden had not gotten hurt, which unfortunately he was hurt in that second game, and he was placed on injured reserve prior to cut down, meaning his season is over. So we'll see how he returns next year. I think if Bolden had remained healthy, he would have had the spot over Amir Speed. That's just my opinion. And Shaun Wade, I think we saw some ascension from him in his play. His versatility, to your point from earlier, I think is what really cemented his spot on the team. So really those two guys, Steve, are the only real surprises of this defensive back group. I think overall this group isn't really top heavy. A lot of versatile players from all over, whether it's cornerback or safety. I'm still worried, given that if they have one big injury, especially to a true cornerback, I'm really worried about that overall. I would like to see them add a veteran cornerback at least to the practice squad to make me feel a little bit better about it, Steve. Especially with Jack Jones' situation, we're not sure how that's going to play out. But I think right now you're looking at Jalen Mills playing more of a free safety role, moving a lot of the linebackers around, Kyle Duggar playing, predominantly back there, and then having Christian Gonzalez and Jack Jones on the outside at corner with Jonathan Jones in the slot. I think that's how it will probably go, I'm guessing, but we'll see. What are your thoughts on the defensive backs?
Yeah, I think they're okay. I mean, they have 4 outstanding safeties. I just think that, and actually you could say they have a 5th because at times they could move Mapu back there depending on, what defense they're in. So I think the back end is really strong. As you said, you have a rookie starting on one side and Jack Jones on the other. I mean, I like those two guys. I think they're going to be just fine, but we don't know, if Gonzalez will go through a little bit of a learning curve, and again, Jack's whole legal woes are something to keep an eye on because that will definitely hurt their depth. But putting in Shaun Wade or Amir Speed at times, I think it will be good because they're, Wade has good size. He's pretty versatile. So I like the secondary, but yes, they can't afford to get too many injuries there.
No, I certainly agree. Claire mentioned in the comments talking about, Trey Flowers too, kind of in that mix, PUP. I still think that he kind of was a late addition that they're going to see how he looks maybe more towards the middle-ish, 40%-ish part of the season and then see where he's at. And then they'll kind of bring him along if he can contribute anything, if there's any kind of injuries or not. For the meantime, I'm happy with the younger guys they have on that front there for the defensive line. Steve, do you still have the practice squad list in front of you?
Yes, I certainly do.
Would you
okay.
Would you read those off?
Yes. Wide receiver Thyrick Pitts.
Really like
Bailey Zappe, tackle Andrew Stuber, Malik Cunningham, safety Joshua Bledsoe is another good safety that they can rely on. Punter Corliss Waitman, I was a little surprised with them holding on to him. Now, reportedly, they signed Jeremiah Farms, the defensive tackle, but he wasn't at practice today. Calvin Munson, Cody Russi, Ty Montgomery, Kevin Hatt, Sokol. linebacker Joe Giles Harris, and tight end Pharaoh Brown.
Thank you for that recap. No, certainly. An interesting list there. A lot of guys they kept around. Pharaoh Brown, I think, is the only guy that's really outside. Steve.
Mm-hmm. All the rest were guys that they had in camp all summer.
Yep. So, look, I think Kevin Harris, Ty
Giles
Montgomery.
Harris, yeah, Giles
Well, he
Harris.
was a
They
late
kind of
addition,
brought
but
in
he was
late.
still here, relatively recently. I think, Kevin Harris, Ty Montgomery as your backup. I think one of those guys, probably Montgomery, will be called up on game days, something like that. I really liked what Thyrick Pitts showed at times. I think he made a couple of good catches in training camp. People had some good things to say around him based on reports. I thought he made some good of some of his opportunities. 6'2", 200 pounds, as a guy that I am just kind of keeping an eye and kind of just an eye on maybe towards next season. So I'm glad he flashed a little bit at times in a pretty crowded room. Receivers and corners are always so crowded for all teams. The fact that he was able to make some plays is always good to see someone stand out from that standpoint. And look, they have some good depth across that practice squad. Basically, just so everyone knows, you can have 6 veterans, which they changed a couple of years ago, expanded the practice squad, which I thought was a very good move for teams. I really think they should be expanding the roster and practice squad and adding another bye week at some point is what I would like to see happen when they inevitably add another regular season game and get rid of one of these preseason games. But that's kind of a story for another day. Steve, any thoughts on the Patriots practice squad as of now?
No, I think there wasn't really any surprises there. I mean, they liked the guys that they were forced to let go of, and they brought them back.
Yep.
And I thought it was that was a good analysis on Pitts, because I thought that he did flash a little bit, and he's got good size. So, if anything would have happened to a guy like maybe Parker, if he gets hurt during the season, elevating Pitts for a game or two, if they need to, might be a good idea. I mean, he's intriguing as a developmental guy, and he showed enough for them to bring him back. So that's good stuff. I like, as I said earlier, the addition of Pharaoh Brown, because he did work with Bill O'Brien in the past, and I'm curious to see how he fits in. I think he'll be your third tight end, and I like this practice squad. Like I said, I didn't think there were any surprises on it. So, combined with the guys that they kept, I think they're going to be okay. I'm not falling into this gloom and doom stuff. I think they're going to get the offensive line sorted, and I don't think they showed anything of what this offense is going to actually look like when the games start for real.
Right. I'm not sure either. And those are all good points. So something that you mentioned earlier, with Corliss Waitman, keeping another punter, I was surprised by that. I think if anything, you would think that maybe they would keep an extra kicker around.
Mm-hmm.
And Waitman, I think, looked fine, but they went with Behringer. I think that was the right call. But, to me, I wonder if that's going to change. Have we found out anything about Ronnie Perkins, Steve?
No, he's still out there.
So I thought for sure, JJ Taylor and Ronnie Perkins are 2 guys that I thought were going to be in the mix. Karen Gregan reported that JJ Taylor is potentially looking at other opportunities. I think he just realizes where he kind of fits in and sits here in the hierarchy of running backs for the Patriots. And I just think he's probably looking for an opportunity to get some more, go somewhere else for a better opportunity, essentially. And I have a sneaking suspicion, Steve, Ronnie Perkins will be back on the practice squad sooner rather than later. I just call it a gut feeling. I'm not giving you insight or, any kind of intel here. That's just my feeling is within the next week, Ronnie Perkins will be back on this Patriots 53 or not on the 53 on the practice squad.
Yeah. A question from Jonas. How do we feel about the addition of Zeke? I'm all for that. I think,
Yep.
They didn't bring him in to be the bell cow, running back. They brought him in to be the 1B to the 1A of Ramondre Stevenson. And I really think that, those two are going to complement each other in a big way. So I'm really happy for that. I didn't want them to bring him in to be the guy. That's still Stevenson.
You have my dog
Hi,
making
puppy.
making a special appearance. Say hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
But no, it's a good question, Jonas, because I do think he's going to pay dividends for them this year. And,
Yeah. No.
along with my feelings for Zeke, I think he complements Stevenson because he does a couple of things that Stevenson doesn't excel at really well, and that's the short yardage goal line stuff. So, I think that's going to pay dividends as well.
I agree. You kind of said it all, but I will just say that, for Zeke, I think taking several series off a game. Look at Jonas giving you a couple of flames. He's on fire, and I agree. That's why I don't have a lot to add. I just think taking a couple of reps off of and series off of Stevenson's play will help keep him fresher down the stretch. As you mentioned, Zeke's a guy with a lot of miles on his tires, but still has some good punch and left him really good in the red zone where the Patriots have struggled. I think they'll probably use both running backs on occasion at the same time, specifically in the red zone. I think that would make a ton of sense. I'm looking forward to the addition there. I'm still, again, a little surprised there wasn't more of a traditional James White-esque style player kept, which is where I thought the Pierre Strong thing would have kept. Where I think Pierre Strong, where I was a little surprised where he was gone. I thought maybe they would have kept him around, but I just think that they just valued tackle depth over that. And Chris mentions, we don't do a ton of fantasy stuff, but I have no problem answering this. Should he be drafting Zeke in fantasy then? I would say only if you're in a deeper league or if Stevenson gets hurt. Stevenson's still going to be probably, I would say from a scoring standpoint, he was fourth in receptions among all running backs last year, 69 receptions total. I still think he's going to be probably a second round draft pick in a lot of leagues, probably your eighth or so best running back. It's always good to have what you call a handcuff in fantasy, which for Stevenson would be Zeke. I don't know exactly what his role is. I probably wouldn't take it if you were in like a 10-man league, but if you were in a 12-man league or greater, then I would stash him on your bench if you have it. Wasn't expecting to go there, but I will mention also that Claire agrees with me on the punting and kicking situation. Anytime Claire agrees with me, I have to post it because I just want to just want everyone to be happy. Okay. Man, I feel like we had so much to talk about and we did a good job, I think, recapping a lot of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I didn't mention. What do you think, Steve, of kind of everything we've discussed today? Is there anything that you feel like we missed?
No, I mean, this is the initial 53. It's
right.
Not going to be the 53 that is there on, week 1 against Philly. And it definitely won't be the 53 at the end of the season. Things are going to change. But, they had their initial guys, the guys that they liked. And, health is always a big thing. And that's what a lot of the questions surrounding this team is around health right now. And that's why I think things are finally trending in the right direction. They're getting the guys back that they need. And, let's see. I mean, I'm not, as I said, I'm not the gloom and doom that the sky's falling here and they're going to, lose 15 games or whatever. I think they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree. I did see that. Speaking of games, and I know next week, just so everyone knows, so next week we are going to start with our season predictions, both for the team and both for probably, some of the playoff spots we'll talk about, maybe some of the awards, who we think could go to the Super Bowl, etc. So we'll do that next week, and we'll also preview the Eagles games, the Eagles game week 1. And so aside from, the predictions and that, probably updating some roster transactions because I would expect a couple of moves from now until then. So we'll discuss all that next week. So I'm looking forward to that because there's plenty to talk about. As far as this, Steve, goes. And these are kind of my final thoughts on at least the Patriots specifically. I always laugh at, some of the initial reaction. I know Greg Bedard, for example, who I know not everyone, I think he's kind of an acquired taste. I think when he wants to be objective, he's really good, but I think sometimes he just comes across as kind of one of these hot take artists because he's on, a lot of the Boston sports shows. And so that's why
He's on the hot take show.
Well, yes, of course. But I would say, unfortunately, that's where a lot of sports journalism, in my mind, has been soured across. It's not a Patriots related thing. This is an all sports thing where you have to come in with these outlandish, over the top takes. Or if you just come out with good analysis, it takes a really long time to build up some kind of a following, where if you're a little bit more all over the place, it kind of usually gets you, more clicks, more views, whatever. And I think that, he was talking about them kind of dumpster diving for tight end depth, for receiver depth, for running back depth, for a lot of these things. And I don't necessarily agree. I think that a lot of Patriots fans would agree that, offensive line probably wasn't addressed the way we expected it to. But I also always laugh at, people who have like these crazy claims right after the initial 53-man roster. Like there's not going to be 8 or 9 transactions between yesterday at 4 p.m. Eastern and next Thursday, or what next Tuesday. You're talking about they've already done 2 IR moves, made a couple other additions. I mean, they're up to probably 4 or 5 within 24 hours. I bet you they make another 8 to 10 roster moves between now and an opening kickoff. So I just feel like people need to kind of, relax when it comes down to, initial 53-man thoughts. Anything else, Steve, for you before we wrap up the show?
No, it was a interesting summer. And now they've made their choices, and, we'll see how the roster looks. But, yeah, Claire, she must not have been drinking the decaf tonight. That's all.
No, she's up. She's got the fingers. She's got the fingers going. Yeah. And Chris has a question too. Do you think this OL will be able to protect Mac? The rumor going around, I saw the old X or Twitter, I don't know what even to call it anymore. On X is what I've seen the last couple, within the last 24 hours, is that Mac Jones was actually banged up pretty good against the Packers, and that's why they canceled practice with the Titans and why he didn't play in the last game, because they wanted to make sure that he was going to hold up. I obviously have no idea if that's true or not. It makes sense to me, but I think that, resting him, would have made sense, assuming that was the case. Do I think that they'll be able to, hold up and protect him? I really don't know the answer to that, Chris. I really think that the offense is going to be better. I think the team's going to be better, but I think the competition is going to be harsh. I think of the 4 teams that you're facing to start the season, I would argue 3 of them have probably the top 5 defensive fronts in all of football. And I think that's a really tough way to start. I'm really not sure about what they're going to do as a starting offensive line unit. I don't know what the new offense is going to look like with Billy O'Brien. I'm sure they'll put things in place to protect him, but Mac has to show that he's able to, for one, have commanded the offense and commanded this new system. For 2, he needs to be able to trust his coaching staff and the line in front of him. And then 3rd, and most importantly, he needs to be able to stay healthy throughout the course of the year. I mean, that's one of the most underappreciated things about Brady, in my opinion, was how he was able to consistently fight through like severe injuries, and a lot of good quarterbacks and a lot of great players in this league do. And Mac needs to prove that, in my opinion.
Totally agree.
I just want to share this last story, Steve, before we get off, and it's not Patriots related at all. Which is basically former Cardinals coach Steve Wilks. Did you see the story that broke before we hopped on? Basically testified during an arbitration hearing that basically he was given a burner phone by general manager Steve Keim during their time at the end of during the Arizona Cardinals, and when Keim was suspended, and he was given the burner phone so that they could be in contact with him throughout his Keim's suspension, and basically, be able to talk when he wasn't supposed to have any surprising, any kind of contact with the team. To me, Steve, this is the least surprising news I've ever seen. I'm not surprised at all. I'm not saying that it's not against the rules. I'm just saying that I don't care if it's the Cardinals or any of the 31 NFL teams all across a bunch of different sports, Steve. This is exactly what I would kind of expect I remember around, because I do live in Arizona for people that don't know, and I remember around the time of he's suspended, there were rumors across local stations here that Keim was delivering messages to his coaching staff when they were getting lunch and food deliveries. Like they would order pizzas, and Keim would have like a whole pizza box lined with a bunch of stuff they needed to discuss. And I have no idea if that's true or not. All I know is that it's a really, really not surprising. And Steve Wilkes saying this, I don't know what that will grant him, but I know that it probably won't hold up very well across a lot of teams because, unfortunately, that's just not the way that this thing works.
No, and again, it probably won't get a lot of, hardcore coverage on this.
No, of course not. And plus, the Cardinals are a terrible franchise as it is. So,
right. But I can guarantee you, if that story was coming out of Foxborough,
MSNBC up front. So
yeah, that would be on all the major networks' lead story.
Yeah. I want to give out a shout out to Glenn, Jonas, and Todd for liking this feed on Facebook. I want to, and from our other streams, I want to give a shout out to Chris and Claire and Jonas for commenting in so much. We certainly do appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to pretty much, Miguel and everybody else who we had contact with over Twitter who retweeted this thing. We always appreciate all the interaction as we do the show, because there's a lot to talk about. And, we've always done the show, whether it was just the two of us or when we were doing it with Russ or when Russ does his shows, we always do it because we enjoy the team and we like talking about it. And it's fun to talk about and get other people's opinions who are fans of the team as well. So appreciate everyone chiming in. I also really do want to mention, please, again, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, and as well on YouTube. For podcasts, like us, share us, leave us a review, please. It keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Again, one more time, Steve Balsherry, Derek Havens for PatsFans.com. We're looking forward to talking with you next week, previewing Week 1 against the Eagles. We almost made it here, Steve, talking about some of these transactions and talking about our predictions for the season. For Derek Havens, Steve Balsherry, we will see you guys next week. Thank you for listening.